Hi, and welcome to Global Architectures with JFrog Enterprise and JFrog Mission Control webinar. So I'm the speaker today, Mansimran Singh, Solutions Engineer at JFrog, part of the Solution Engineering team, working with more than 3,000 customers, integrating Artifactory into their architectures. Basically, Solution Engineering team is responsible for handling the use cases for the customers and suggesting them the best practices in order to follow for. So quickly going over the agenda and what we are going to cover up today. Since this is the second part of the enterprise webinar, and in the very first part, we covered up how to set up an HA out of the Artifactory nodes, where one of the nodes is the primary and the other ones are the secondary ones. And that is the active cluster, meaning that if one of the node goes down, your users and your build processes are not affected in any way. In fact, it's a zero-time upgrade maintenance process since both the nodes are active. Now, this is the second part of the webinar where we would be considering the points where the bigger organizations are having multiple development centers, not just in US, but they have the development centers in Europe and Asia and some other regions as well. So they need to quickly scale and they need to manage all these instances and all these HA clusters, effectively utilize the resources, and then how to create the users and how to create the repositories, how to update these repositories, how to configure the security mechanisms and all this stuff. So in the very beginning, we would be quickly going over the JFrog platform. Then we would see how to manage the multiple Artifactory instances. We would be going through some demos where we would be creating and managing the multi-site topologies as well. And in the end, we would see how you can basically manage your disaster recovery using the JFrog Mission Control. And that's a very, very important aspect as well, because most of the time you would be working on the mission critical projects and you cannot afford to basically lose all your data. So disaster recovery should be in place, and we would be learning more about it as well. And of course, we would be covering up some new features which are coming up in the mission control. So basically, this is the JFrog platform or JFrog ecosystem, where you can see that multiple projects or multiple products are actually exchanging information between themselves. And you can consider this as the base of your CI/CD pipeline as well, where basically everything starts with the developers writing the new code. And of course, everybody knows that everything starts with the awesome developers writing the awesome code. And as soon as they start declaring the dependencies into their code, basically they come to JFrog Artifactory in order to resolve those dependencies. Now, if the dependencies are available locally, Artifactory is going to resolve them immediately. But if they are not presented locally, Artifactory is going to get those dependencies from the remote repositories like JCenter, Maven Central, etc., etc. Now, when Artifactory is resolving those dependencies from the remote repositories, basically it would be caching those artifacts for your future use as well. So the next time you need the same artifact, there is no need to go anywhere else because everything would be presented locally. Assuming that the developer is happy with all the dependencies, his project is running fine, basically he commits the changes to the VCS, and as soon as the changes are committed, your CI server is going to trigger in. Now, basically, when the CI server is going to trigger in, it's going to run the same build what the developer was running in the earlier steps. Now, the same process would be initiated over here as well. The project needs the same dependencies, but the good news is that this time the resolving process would be much, much faster because whatever was required, that's readily available inside Artifactory. And in the end, when the build is successful, it's going to publish the modules and some other information as well. And this is what we call as build info or BOM, build of materials, or single source of truth as well, because there's a lot of information which is being captured during this process, which needs to be preserved. For example, what are the system variables? What are the environment variables? What are the published modules? What are the dependencies associated with them? All this information is being captured with the help of the plugins which are available for the CI servers, which are also shown in this particular diagram. And in the end, your tools or your QA tools like Cucumber, Selenium, they also can contribute some metadata towards these artifacts, For example, as soon as the build is published, you can give this build to your QA team. And as soon as the QA team starts testing this build, basically they can contribute towards the metadata that this particular build is running slow or fine. This has been approved by the QA manager. This is production ready. So all this metadata can be preserved right inside Artifactory, and you can basically run some automations around this metadata in order to capture more information about it. And side by side, you can see that we would be managing all these global Artifactory instances, irrespective of their location, with the help of mission control. And you can also scan all your artifacts for the discovering security vulnerability, license compliance issues with the help of JFrog X-Ray. And in the end, when everybody's satisfied and the artifacts are production ready, you can basically use the provisioning tools like Puppet, Ansible, Chef in order to deploy these artifacts to your production servers. But if your software is more like a downloadable software, you can basically put it on JFrog Bintray, which is a distribution platform. And basically you can distribute your binaries behind the CDN network. Great. So this was about how a CI/CD pipeline should be. And this is how Artifactory serves as a central piece over here. And this would be more clear in this particular diagram. Now you can see that the Artifactory is right in the center and all the other things are revolving around it. And since Mission Control is there to help you up in order to scale, in order to manage these Artifactory instances, you can use it for doing a lot of things like creating the topologies, managing the artifacts, managing disaster recovery instances and all this stuff. And apart from that, you can side by side also scan all your artifacts with the help of X-Ray. And as I said, that in the end, when something is ready and it's finalized, you can put it on Bintray to distribute to your external customers or your remote employees, which are having poor connectivity issues, because everything would be behind CDN. So your downloads would be much, much faster. Now, when we're talking about multiple Artifactory instances, now it's important to understand that even in a single location, you could be having multiple Artifactory instances. It's not necessary that you need to have a global footprint in order to use mission control. Many of our customers are having multiple Artifactory instances in a single location. And as an admin, it becomes a little difficult to manage each and every instance. For example, I just need to see the status that it's online or offline. So I need to go to each individual Artifactory instance. But with the help of mission control, you can basically log into a single screen and you can check all the status of all the Artifactory instances, whether they are up or running, what their JVM usage is, what is the number of threads they are consuming, if anything is coming close to its threshold value, what it would be. So all these things are readily available in the dashboard. And of course, you have the options for scripting each and everything. And since everything is all about automation, so you can write the DSL scripts, which you can store right inside Mission Control. And you can also configure your Git repository with Mission Control so that you can directly import or export all your scripts over there. And of course, in the end, all these information is kind of serving as a single pane of glass for all your instances, and it helps the admin as well. Now, we would be going through a small demo where we would be registering a new Artifactory instance. And then we would see that if we are registering an instance, what is the information which we can see immediately about it. And then we would be creating a new user, which would be available on all the Artifactory instances which are being registered with Mission Control. And we would also see some monitoring, which is presented inside Mission Control as well. So let's go to the demo part. Now, this is the homepage of Mission Control. And on the homepage only, without going into any complexities, you can see there is a geolocation map. And you can see that all your Artifactory instances are up or running or not. For example, if I just mouse over my mouse over the name of that particular instance, you can see its version, its license, and its name. And green means it's running. And if it turns red, it means that it's in offline status. So just within 2 seconds, I can see that out of the 3 instances, if any of the instance is not running, if there's an error or what. And you can also get a list of all these things as well. In the list, you can see if there is any instance which is offline. And in the list, you can always see that what all instances are running online as well. So going back, you can see the map. And now, in order to register a new instance is again very, very easy. You just need to click the add instance link over here. As soon as you click, it's going to show you some information which you need to put in. For example, what is the name of the Artifactory instance you want to put in? I just name my instances by the location. Then you need to provide the URL, which is also a mandatory field. Then you need to provide the username and password for that particular instance. And if you're using any proxy, well and good. And in order to specify location, you can simply search it over here. For example, I want to put the Shanghai for the new instance. Right now, I haven't put any information, so this is showing as a grade 1. As soon as I put the information, it would be turning green, and it means that basically this instance is now registered with mission control and it's up and running. So as you can see, this is very, very easy to register a new instance, just matter of 5 seconds. And whenever you put all the information, just click save, and your Artifactory instance would be presented on this particular map as well. Now, the second thing, assuming that we had put in the information regarding a new Artifactory instance, we just need to click on it. And as soon as you click on it, it's going to be telling you its status, its name, a URL in order to go to that particular Artifactory instance, which becomes also very easy to visit, and accordingly the version as well. Now you can also click on the repository section to see what all repositories are there in that particular Artifactory instance. And if you click on the connections, which we would be visiting after some time as well, it's going to be showing you what all replications are going on from one Artifactory instance to the another Artifactory instance as well. And in the system info, you can always see information like what's a heap memory usage and all these parameters. Apart from that, all the system variables, all the environment variables, each and everything is rightly presented inside Artifactory. There's no need to put in any other thing because this is where you would be coming in and gathering all the information. Now, in the license, you can see what sort of license is being running on this particular instance. It's an active one, it's an enterprise license, and it's validity. And if it's an HA one, you can see that you can see the status of both the nodes. This is my HA instance. So you can see that both the nodes are running fine, the primary and the secondary. If any of the nodes is not running fine, its state would be shown as not running or offline. And this is the way you can basically get all the information over here. There's some action buttons as well. For example, in order to refresh, if you want to edit the information about this particular Artifactory instance, you can do that as well. Going back. And if you want to remove the instance, you can simply click on this particular instance and the instance would be removed as well. Now, if we go into the monitoring sections, which is again a very interesting thing to note, because as an admin, I'm always worried about the resources. Now, in order to see what all resources are being consumed, you can just simply click on the monitor tab and it's going to be telling you about its heap memory usage, about its CPU usage, about all the other things as well. For example, I'm coming to the threshold value of the RAM. So I'm almost near to it. And if I just would be running some more applications, it's going to be crashing away. So this is again a very, very important thing to observe as well. And in the storage summary, you would be able to see the total number of the binaries, the size of the binaries. If there is any optimization achieved, you can see that as well. And over here, you would be able to see the storage used by each and every repository and the number of total files, folders, and items in that particular repository. Accordingly, its type as well. For example, it could be a local repository, it could be a remote, it could be a virtual, it could be a cache, it could be a distribution as well. So you can see all this information over here. And of course, in the replication tab, we would be able to see the replications when we set that up. And in the task summary, you would be able to see all the cron-based tasks which are scheduled to run at periodic intervals. So all this information is rightly available over here as well. So we have covered the dashboard tab, we have covered the view tab, we had covered the monitor tab. And now it's the time to manage the Artifactory instances. Now, since as part of the demo, I have 3 Artifactory instances being configured with mission control. This is a HA instance. These are the 2 single instances. So what if I want to create a new user on all these Artifactory instances? One way is to go on each and individual Artifactory instance and then just click creating a new user and giving the information. And you have to repeat this 3 times. But with the help of mission control, you just click on the security tab, create new user, check all the Artifactory instances on which you want to create the user, click on the user info, provide the name, for example, user webinar. You just provide the email ID, webinars@jfrog.com, and you can always send your questions to webinars@jfrog.com as well. You just need to provide the password, and if you want to make this particular user as an admin on all the instances, click this checkbox. If you want to disable their internal passwords, you can check this checkbox. You just click add user, click continue. Now till over here it's in pending state because I haven't clicked the execute button. As soon as I execute it, it's gonna be creating the new user on all the instances, and side by side it's also gonna be giving you the information that user is created or not. And if you want to roll back, that if you by mistake create a wrong user with the wrong credentials or something like that, you can always roll back as well. Now let us go to each Artifactory instance in order to see the newly created user. So you can see the user webinar with the email address as webinars@jfrog.com. These are the parameters which we have provided over there. And now let me go to another HA instance. So we click on the users. So we had provided as the webinars. So here is the user webinar. And if you go to our third instance as well, if you go into the users tab, so you can see the user is being created over here as well. So as you can see that this becomes very, very easier to manage the new user groups, permission targets. All these things can be done with the help of mission control. There is no need to go to each Artifactory instance and provide all these details again and again. This saves a lot of time. And of course, you can write the scripts for it as well. And this makes your task much, much easier because your scripts would be free from the human errors, which you might do while doing all these things. Once you create the scripts, you can basically run these scripts at periodic intervals. For example, in order to create a new script, you just need to click this button. And in order to create the new instance, you can write the new script over here. And in order to set up the repositories, again, some of the repository scripts are there. But if you want to write a new script, click on the new button. Sorry about that. You just type control space, and mission control is going to give you some templates in order to make your learning curve easier on how to create the new repositories. Each and everything is being given over here. And you can also integrate your Git account with the mission control. So you can see that my Git account is being configured with over here. And I can basically do the bidirectional push and pulls from the Git. And you can always go to this particular link in order to get the repositories as well. This particular link is open, and you can get all the JFMC scripts which I would be running today as part of the demo. And you can basically experiment with these scripts after getting it from our GitHub page as well. Now let me go back. Great, we had seen you can create the group scripts, you can create the user script, you can create the proxy scripts. And this is a shortcut to get the instance scripts or the repository scripts. Now let me go back to the presentation. Great, we have covered the new Artifactory instance, dashboard overview, creating the new user, and monitoring overview as well. Sorry. So let's talk about multi-site topology. Now, once we understand that you have Artifactory instances at multiple locations, it becomes very, very important to understand how you can basically leverage the replication feature of Artifactory. For example, now, since I have covered this topic in detail in my last webinar, and I explicitly explained that what are the pain points when you are a global enterprise and you have multiple locations, you have thousands of developers working for you, and you just follow the same terminology, you are not stopping your development at any site at any point of time. So it becomes very, very important to have the artifacts available to each and every location at that very moment whenever they're pushed to the global Artifactory instances. Now, in order to understand more about it, let's cover up this. So of course, when the developers are working on a project, they all need the same version of that particular artifact, otherwise it would be creating a problem. For example, your US team might be using the version 1, but your India team might be using the version 2, but your European team might be using the version 3. So of course, it creates a lot of problems. In this way, as soon as a US developer pushes an artifact into Artifactory, the same would be available to your other two instances as well. Of course, artifacts would be shared efficiently with your global teams. It reduces the risk of the network latency and the stability, and you can access any specific version on the remote artifacts as well. This is a very, very simple example where you can create a multi-site star topology, and we are basically following the terminology A, B, C, D. A for Amsterdam, B for Bangkok, C for Cape Town, and D for Denver. So as soon as an artifact is pushed in Amsterdam, the same artifact would be pushed to Denver, Cape Town, and Bangkok. And this is what we call as multi-push. So you can push to multiple locations at once. It's very, very easy to create a multi-push terminology inside mission control. Very, very easy thing to do as well. And we would be covering up this in detail. This is another example where you can see that Amsterdam could be your central artifactory and your central development center. You can basically push all the artifacts to the other locations. Now let's go through the demo and see how this works. Again, I'm just going to my mission control. I'm going into the manage tab. I'm going into the repositories, new repository, click whatever you want to do, apply script. Here is the replication multi-push, which I am having right now. So you just click add, click continue. So you can see that different options are available for you in order to multi-push it. But since we would be following only one location, so which would be pushing to multiple locations, I'm going back. I'm selecting it again. And what I'm trying to do is I'm only pushing the location Amsterdam to Bangkok and Chicago. So click continue. So whatever repositories I would be selecting to other sites, those would be created as part of your multi-push mechanism. Let's create a very, very quick repository, which I can create with the mission control as well. But I'm just doing it for the sake of convenience in order to make you understand how repositories are created in Artifactory as well. So you just do the star repo in Bangkok. Click save and finish. Your repository is created. You come to Chicago location as well. You go into local repository. You click the new button. You provide the same name. Instead of Bangkok, this is my Chicago. Click save and finish. Now let's go back to mission control. And I need to refresh the page in order to get the new repositories. Location, Amsterdam. Click continue. Now you basically select the repositories which you want to multi-push over there. So you can see some of the repositories are being created at other sites as well. I can select the Bangkok star local in order to push to the Bangkok, and I can select the Chicago local star in order to push to Chicago location. You click continue. Automatically, mission control acknowledges that it needs to create a multi-push terminology to these two locations. If I click execute all, great, it's successful. And if I go to my dashboard, it's gonna be getting the information in few seconds. You can see now it's Amsterdam is pushing to Chicago as well as Bangkok. Very, very simple thing. And if I go to my view tab, if I click on Amsterdam, if I click on connections, now you can see that I'm multi-pushing from Amsterdam to Bangkok and Chicago. And if I click on the connection, you can see this is part of the multi-push, that Amsterdam star local is being pushed to Bangkok star local and Chicago star local. And similarly, it's being multi-pushed to over here as well. So you can see that graphically also, it becomes very, very easy to understand what's going on behind the scenes. Now, if I need to remove this, I just can simply go into my Artifactory location. I can click on the repository, which I was actually multi-pushing. So you can see which repository I was pushing. That's Amsterdam star local. So I can click on Amsterdam star local. And if I go to the replication tab, you can see that 2 locations were added as part of the multi-push terminology. Now, if I just delete this, your replication is gone away. You click save and finish. And if I go back, I click refresh. You can see the connections are gone. And if I go back to the dashboard, your replications, which were shown with the help of the blue lines, they are also gone away as well. So you can see as part of this demo, we created a star topology, meaning that your central location is pushing the artifacts to multiple other locations with the help of scripts. And if we remove the replications from the artifact tree, they are reflected back into the machine controller as well. Great. Let's go back to presentation. So this was about multi-star. Now let's try to understand the mesh topology. Basically, mesh topology states that every site is being connected to every other site. And again, in this diagram, you can see that I'm having 2 locations, A and B, A for Amsterdam, B for Bangkok. Amsterdam is pushing the artifacts to Bangkok, and Bangkok is pushing the artifacts to Amsterdam. Now, in order to make it very, very simple, we are creating 2 repositories for the 2 locations at every site. Whatever goes in Amsterdam local is being pushed to the Bangkok, and Bangkok is having a local repository on the name of the Amsterdam. And similarly, Amsterdam is having a local repository on the name of the Bangkok. In order to make it more simpler for the users or the developers so that they do not get confused what is going on behind the scenes, they basically don't care that from where exactly I am getting the artifacts. So they can simply put the 2 local repositories behind a virtual one so that the developers can get a single URL to work with. They basically don't need to care about from where exactly I'm getting the artifacts. Those who don't understand what virtual repository is the aggregation of multiple repositories so that you can get a single URL to work with. It makes things much, much simpler because all the resolutions from the different repositories being handled by Artifactory, you just need to provide a URL and Artifactory is going to take care of each and everything. This example was very easy to understand for 2 sites. But as I said, global organizations or enterprise organizations can have many Artifactory locations as well. This is a little more complex example where I'm having 4 locations: Amsterdam, Bangkok, Cape Town, and Denver. And I need that whatever I'm being pushing to Amsterdam, that should be pushed to Bangkok, Cape Town, and Denver. And whatever I'm pushing to Bangkok should be pushed to Amsterdam, Cape Town, and Denver, and similarly for each and every other site as well. And similarly, we would be following the same set over here as well. We would be creating the local repository for each site at every other site. For example, in Amsterdam, I'm having the local Bangkok, local Cape Town, and local Denver. In the Bangkok, I'm having local Amsterdam, local Chicago, and local Denver. And in the Cape Town, I'm having local Amsterdam, local Bangkok, and local Denver. All these repositories are being behind the virtual one. So basically, you would be having a single repository to work with. Let's go and create the entire setup with just scripts. We won't be putting anything over there just besides the names. We would be creating the multiple local repositories with the scripts. We would be creating a virtual repository, which would be having these local repositories behind the scenes. And we would be also creating the replication with the help of scripts only. So let's go and run this demo. In order to create the local repositories at every site, I need to create repository. You can see there is a script called as create local repository mesh. And if you want to see what is going on in the script, you just click on this particular link. You click on the repositories. You click on create local repo mesh. So you can see that I will be providing a user input for the repository name. And it automatically would pick up the repo key as an input to the local repository over here. And it's going to be getting the description, notes, include pattern, exclude pattern, all these details right from in the script as only. So let's go back, create this. Apply the script, create local repo mesh. Since I would be creating at every site, click continue. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a local Bangkok script at every site, local Amsterdam script at every site, and local Cape Town at every site, or Chicago. So what I'm going to name is local Bangkok webinar. Similarly, same at Amsterdam. Okay, let's first make one at every site. Click continue, execute all. So now you can see the Bangkok repository is being created at every site. So if we go into the local tab, local, sorry about that, click refresh, go back. So you can see local Bangkok webinar is available over here. Now we need to create the local Amsterdam as well as the local Chicago. So going back, just click the checkboxes, select the script, applying to the locations, click continue, provide the name. This time it would be local Amsterdam webinar, so that we can put all these repositories behind a virtual. Click continue, execute all. Great. If you go back to the location, now we click on local. You can see local Amsterdam is also created. Now we go back and create the Chicago. We continue, and this time name as Chicago. Again, same thing. Great. Now if you go back and we search for local, so you can see local Amsterdam, local Bangkok, and local Chicago is available at Amsterdam site. And if you go to the Bangkok site, if we just click the refresh and we search for the local, so now you can see local Chicago webinar, local Bangkok webinar, and local Amsterdam webinar is created over here as well, and similarly at the third site as well. Now the next step, as we can see in the presentation, the next step is to put all these three locations behind a single virtual repository. Now again, same thing, creating a new repository, which would be a virtual one. Create virtual, create at every site. Now what you need to do is that you need to tell at every site that what all repositories need to go behind a virtual. So if we are at Bangkok, we need to select the webinar. So this is local Amsterdam webinar, local Bangkok webinar, and local Chicago webinar. And you just need to provide some description for this virtual repository. Let's provide the name only, virtual Bangkok webinar. Let's copy this. And you also need to provide a default repository to which the artifacts would be written at that site. This is exactly where the fun begins. So since we are at the Bangkok site, we need to push the artifacts to the Bangkok repository. So you need to provide the Bangkok. Done. Provide the repository name. So at one site, we have done the complete work. We have told Mission Control to put the three repositories behind a virtual one, and we had given it a name. We had also told him that if you're writing the artifacts to that location, where exactly the artifacts would be written as well. And now the same thing would be done over here as well. So since this is in Amsterdam, we would be selecting the Amsterdam, provide the name. Again, select the default repository where the artifacts would be written to. Again, since we are at Amsterdam, so local Amsterdam, just provide the name. And now the third site, Chicago, same process. Chicago, Bangkok, and just provide the description. This time it's Chicago. Provide the default repository. Since this is a Chicago, so would be having a Chicago local. Just provide the name. Continue. Mission control would automatically know that now what repositories should be going on in the virtual ones. So if we go at the site and see the virtual and what we have named as virtual Amsterdam. So right now you can see that there is no virtual Amsterdam repository. If we just click execute all, it's going to create the virtual repository at every site, which would be having all the 3 repositories as well. So let me click the refresh button. And if we search now virtual Amsterdam webinar, you can see the 3 repositories, local Amsterdam, local Bangkok, and local Chicago. And you can see the local Amsterdam webinar, which is a default deployment repository as well. Similarly, these virtual repositories would be available at every site. So if I search it over here as well, so you can see virtual Bangkok webinar. This is having the 3 repositories on the name of Bangkok. And if you go to the third site, if you go into the virtual, if we again search for the webinar, now you can see virtual Chicago webinar. It's having the 3 repositories and a default as well. Great. 2 things have been done out of the 3 steps. First, we created the local repositories at every site. Then we had put the local repositories behind a virtual one. And now let's create the mesh topology. So now I need to just select the locations. I need to select the repositories. The repositories which I want to replicate to the other sites. So I would be selecting the Bangkok from the Bangkok one, the Chicago from Chicago one, and Amsterdam from Amsterdam one. Meaning that whenever I would be pushing something to Amsterdam, that would be pushed to the Bangkok and Chicago. Whenever I would be pushing to something in the Bangkok, that would be replicated to Chicago and Amsterdam. And whenever I would be putting something in the Chicago, that would be put into the Bangkok and Amsterdam. Click continue. Select the replication as mesh. Apply it to sites. Click add. Click continue. Now you need to tell what all repositories you need to multi-push to the other sites. For example, from the Bangkok, you would be pushing to Chicago. So need to select the Chicago. Let me search by webinar only. So from the Bangkok, I would be pushing to the Chicago and Amsterdam. So I need to select the Amsterdam local webinar, local Bangkok, and in the Chicago, I need to select the local Bangkok. So what basically I'm doing is that as soon as I would be pushing something in the local Bangkok, that would be replicated to the local Bangkok in Amsterdam and local Bangkok in Chicago. Similarly, at the other sites, this is the Chicago. So I would be pushing to the Amsterdam and Bangkok. And similarly at the third site. Great. So these are the things which we need to provide. Again, you would be able to see that Mission Control automatically acknowledge that you need to push from Amsterdam to GC Artifactory and the other local host, meaning that the Bangkok and Chicago, from Chicago to Bangkok and Amsterdam, and from Bangkok to Chicago and Amsterdam as well. Click execute all. It would take some time. Great. Your mesh topology is created. and mission control is going to quickly pick that mesh topology. Cool. So now you can see that Amsterdam is pushing to Chicago and Bangkok. Bangkok is pushing to Chicago and Amsterdam, and Amsterdam is and Chicago is pushing to Amsterdam and Bangkok. So basically all the three sites are connected to each other. Each and every site is pushing the artifacts to the other site as well. And now if you want to see visually what's going on, so if you click on the Amsterdam in the connections, you can see that Amsterdam is pushing to Bangkok and Chicago. If you click on the Bangkok, you can see Bangkok is pushing to Amsterdam and Chicago. And if you click on Chicago, you can see that Chicago is pushing to Bangkok and Amsterdam. So all the three sites are connected to each other. As soon as anything is pushed into the one side, that thing would be available to all the other sites as well. Great. So we are done with creating the multi-site mesh topology. Now let's talk about a very important aspect, which is disaster recovery. Now, since every site is being connected to every other site, we also need a site which would serve as a disaster recovery in case your entire data center goes down. So you need to have that information with you if you are just working at one site. So the way it can be done is if you go back into the mission control, if you click on manage tab, there's a DR configuration. Right now, I'm not having anything with me. I don't have a master or a target, so I need to click new. I can simply tell that which is my master site and which is my target site. So what it's going to do is that it's going to completely replicate your Artifactory, not just one repository, but hundreds and thousands of the repositories which are existing in the master site. That would be replicated to the target site. As soon as you click save, now you come over here, you can see your master site is online, your target site is online. This is a version number over here, this is a version number over here. Right now, none of the repositories are fully synced. They are all out of the sync. You can see that these two repositories are out of sync. These are the missing repositories. These are the fully synced repositories. So replication is not started yet. And as soon as I click the initiate button, what it's going to do is that it's going to start replicating all the repositories from one site to another. And at any point of time, if your master site goes down, you can basically switch all your users to the target site so that there is no downtime over there and your builds and user processes are not at all impacted. Assuming that your master site comes up after some time, you can reverse the link. You can make your target as a master and your master as a target. A reverse replication would be going to start in, and both the Artifactory instances would come in sync to each other. And again, you can make your users to go to any of the sites whichever you want to. Now, as soon as I click the initiate button, it asks you that should I go ahead and start a replication. So what it's going to do is that it's going to start the replication over here, and it's going to be going to fully sync all the repositories. And in the log, it's going to tell you what is going on behind the scenes as well. I'm also getting some questions. So I would request you to, okay, sorry. I would answer these questions towards the end of this webinar, which we are just on the verge of completion. And if I show you the logs, so you can see the replication has been started. And after some time, you would be able to see the replication shown over here. The total number of the artifacts would be synced between these two repositories. So its master is now starting to replicate to the target site. And you can see all these things which are in the logs as well. So the sync has been started. The repositories are syncing between themselves. The artifacts are being started to push as well. Great. Now if I go back to the presentation, so you can see the disaster recovery basically takes care of all the repositories, configuration, and security descriptors. It also provides you the flexibility to configure the replication frequency as well. For example, at what time of the day you want to run this thing as. And since we have already gone through the demo, we are done with the webinar. It's time to get the question and answers. So Bill asked me a question that how are repository conflicts resolved? For example, Bangkok and Chicago users commit different files to their local repositories. So you are absolutely right. As part of the creation of the virtual repository, you saw that we are pushing the artifacts to their local deployment repositories. So whenever something is pushed to their local site, that thing goes inside their local repository, and that's the way the conflicts would be handled between the users as well. Great, this has been answered. I'm waiting for some more questions. Okay, so another question is coming in, and the user is asking, can we create or can we group the users through mission control? Yes, definitely. You can create the user groups through mission control as well. And you just need to provide in the script what all users you want to put in as part of that group. And if you go back to your artifact tree, you would be able to see that a group is created with the number of the users which is specified in the script as well. Great. So another question is coming in that you saw, you had shown us the example of a star topology in which the one side was pushing to the two other sides, and the second topology is the mesh topology where every side is being pushing to every other side. Is there any other topology as well? It all depends upon the organizational policies. Irrespective of whatever you want to set up, you can set up the star topology, you can set up the mesh topology, and if any other topology is there in your organization, you can basically follow that topology as well. It's just a matter of scripts which you want to write over there. So Bill is asking me another question. What is the practical limit to the number of sites in a multi-site mesh or a star topology? So basically, you would be setting up a Artifactory instance at every other site. If you're having 10 sites or 15 sites or 20 sites, you can basically set up Artifactory instances at each site for the users to have the convenience to pick up the artifacts from their local location. But I won't be suggesting you to put up almost assuming that 5 Artifactory instances at each side. However, if you have the requirement of this much load and this much users, and you can justify the requirement as well, but since you would be putting up the Artifactory instance or an HA cluster at each side, you won't be exceeding more Artifactory instances than the number of the sites as well. And same goes for the star and the mesh. Okay. Any other questions? So somebody asked me that how can we get the scripts? I'm going to paste the URL of the script in the chat so that it's available for everyone. Let me go back and pick up the URL for you people. So you can see the page is github.com/jfrogtraining/jfmc, and I'm going to paste the same thing into the chat so that it's available for everyone. So now you can basically pick up this location and you can go and see the scripts which I created. For example, creating a local repository mesh. You can see that what all things are going inside. If you want to create a virtual one, if you want to create the replication multi-push, which I followed as well. There are some other scripts as well. For example, creating the new user, your pull command for the JFMC, your star topology replication setup, your Artifactory pull commands as well. And there is a command list where you can get some basic commands regarding the Artifactory as well as mission control. So you can get all this list from here. So my colleague is telling me that she would also send the link with the recording of this webinar. So expect this link to be available to you with the follow-up email as well. So we are at the last part of the webinar. If you are not having any more questions, basically we are winding up this webinar for you. But we do conduct these webinars from time to time, and every Tuesday we have the webinar series for the Artifactory, where the very first Tuesday is for Introduction to Artifactory, in which we cover the basic things about the Artifactory, the OSS version and its features. In the second Tuesday, or on the second Tuesday, we cover up the Pro or the professional version of the Artifactory, where we cover up very important automations and the topics over there. And on the third Tuesday, we cover up the topics for the high availability or the enterprise version of the Artifactory. And on the fourth Tuesday, we basically cover up the second part of your enterprise webinar, which was done today, how to scale up with the mission control. Apart from this, we also have some special webinars on the Thursdays as well as Wednesdays, where we cover up some interesting topics in terms of new technologies which are coming into the market, new features which are coming into the Artifactory. We also do some partner webinars with our partners for X-Ray, for Artifactory, for Bintray. So all these webinars are done on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays. And if you want to register for any of these webinars, or you want to see the information about of these webinars, you can go to jfrog.com/webinars. Again, you would be getting this link in the follow-up email as well. You can register to any of the webinar, and you would be getting a reminder on that particular day to visit that particular webinar as well. Great. Thank you for attending this webinar. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.